it's Ramon here. We're going to be looking at Jimmy Page's guitars throughout his early career and his career with Led Zeppelin. For me, Jimmy Page has got to be one of the most versatile guitar players, and I think his guitar collection really does reflect that. Jimmy was born in 1944 in West London. His early influences were guitar players like Scotty Moore, James Burton, and also singers like Elvis Presley. Like a lot of guitar players from his generation, he was really influenced by Lonnie Donegan and skiffle music, which was really popular in the UK from the mid-50s up until the early 60s, until the Beatles came along. I think his first guitar was a classical sort of guitar, not a very good one. But then he progressed to a Hofner Senator. And that basically came from the Selmer catalogue of guitars. And Selmer was like the main proprietor of musical instruments in sort of England around that time in the 50s and 60s. So this particular guitar, the Hofner Senator, was pretty basic, pretty cheap, but you could actually upgrade it with pickups and so forth. This sort of guitar was great for playing jazz and also for playing skiffle. So it was a pretty good guitar for Jimmy to start on. Okay, guys, so Jimmy sort of went from playing skiffle music to rock and roll, and he wanted a solid body. So he actually wanted a Stratocaster, as did George Harrison. But I think at the time there was some kind of an embargo where UK couldn't actually get hold of Fender Stratocasters, but a small company in Czechoslovakia got hold of a real Fender Stratocaster and made a copy of it, which I think they go as Futurama. But this particular one that Jimmy Page had was actually labelled a Resonate Gracioso, and it's basically a copy of a Fender Stratocaster. Even had a 5-way switch, which was quite innovative because the Fender one only had a 3-way switch. Let's talk about Jimmy's 3-pickup Les Paul custom guitar. He actually bought that one in 1962, and it got quite a heavy use around 63 to 66, mainly when he was doing his session work. Later on in Led Zeppelin, he actually got Joe Jammer to custom wire it for him. So there were 3 toggle switches on the top bout of the guitar, which enabled him to switch on and off each pickup and in any combination. So the 1960 Gibson Les Paul Custom was actually Jimmy Page's main session instrument. Unfortunately, it was actually stolen in 1970 during a Led Zeppelin US tour. An interesting feature of this guitar was a factory-fitted Bigsby tremolo and the Grover tuners. This was the guitar that Jimmy used to record Whole Lotta Love. Okay, a special mention has to go to a 1959 Gibson Les Paul Standard called the Keith Burst. Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones actually used this instrument from 1964 until 1966, until he started to favour a Les Paul Custom. There's a photo here I'm going to show you guys of Jimmy Page recording a song called Heart of Stone around July 1964. So I'm just guessing that he probably used it in the session. But this guitar was very famous, and lots of guitar players such as Eric Clapton and Mick Taylor from the Blues Breakers, who later went on to play for the Rolling Stones, they all used this guitar. In 1965, Jimmy got hold of a 1961 Danelectro 3021. This is quite an important instrument in the history of Led Zeppelin, as it was used on tracks such as Kashmir, etc., especially as a live instrument. He actually used it in some studio sessions, as this photo shows. One of the coolest things is seeing Jimmy play Kashmir on this guitar, and especially when it's tuned to Dagad, and it's got a phaser on it as well. It just sounds so cool. He actually used it with the Yardbirds on a track called White Summer from the album Little Games. I just want to say the first person to actually use Dagad tuning was a guy called Davey Graham, so I just want to put a special mention out to him. And you know what, we're actually going to do a video about him pretty soon, because he's a really cool guitar player and someone that definitely influenced and a whole host of other British guitar players. Between 1963 and the middle of 1966, Jimmy Page became a first call session guitar player, and he was, making quite a bit of money out of it. So because it was so lucrative, I don't think he really wanted to be in a band and go touring. However, one night whilst watching the Yardbirds, the bass player actually quit the band, and so Jimmy Page stepped in to play bass. So in June 1966, Jimmy joined the Yardbirds, and when he first joined, he actually played 1961 Epiphone EB232 bass. Let's talk about one of Jimmy's most famous guitars, his 1959 Fender Telecaster. This particular guitar was actually owned by Jeff Beck originally, and when he departed the Yardbirds, he left it for Jimmy Page to play. Jimmy Page then switched from bass to guitar. Okay, let's talk a little bit further about this Telecaster. As a nod to Syd Barrett from Pink Floyd, Jimmy sort of decided to put these reflective circles on the Telecaster. Then in 1967 he decided to completely strip all the paint from the body, and he hand painted a psychedelic dragon on the front. So since that time it's been known as the Dragon Telecaster. This Tele is also famous because Page actually introduced playing the instrument with a cello bow. It's said that he recorded most of Led Zeppelin 1 with this guitar, and also on Led Zeppelin 4, the solo for Stairway to Heaven. This guitar really became his main instrument up until 1969. And I think it had something to do with some dodgy paint job where it broke one of the pickups. So he didn't tend to use it anymore and favoured the Les Pauls after that. A really cool guitar that Jimmy used in the Yardbirds was a Vox Phantom 12 guitar. And he got this early in 1967, and he used it on a few tracks, including Tinker Tailor Soldier Sailor from the Yardbirds album Little Games, and he also used it in Led Zeppelin recording the rhythm track for Thank You. And being a 12 string, it's definitely got a kind of Birds vibe about it. I thought we'd include Jimmy's 1965 Fender Electric 12 string in this part of the two-part series, because apparently Jimmy Page got this guitar whilst he was in the Yardbirds. So, I mean, it's not confirmed. Let me know if you know anything about this, guys. But I know he did use this on Led Zeppelin 4, recording Stairway to Heaven and When the Levee Breaks. So let me know if you know any more information about this guitar. Okay, we've only had time to really briefly go into the guitar's history, but, you know, please leave some comments and let me know what you know about those guitars, especially, for example, you know, like the Phantom guitar. That's pretty unusual. So don't forget to like, subscribe and share. And in part 2, we're going to be talking about Led Zeppelin and all the Les Pauls, etc. that you use. Okay, until then, take care. See you soon.